I've been looking at Anatalakkhana Sutta, the discourse on the not-self characteristic. There are three universal characteristics: anicca, dukkha, anatta. And here we've been focusing on anatta, which is probably not wise, since it's the most subtle and difficult to understand of all three. When I was practicing Zen many years ago in Hawaii, I heard many Dharma talks, but in Zen the Dharma talk is called Teisho in Japanese, and apparently it means presenting the shout, and what is being shouted is the Dharma. The idea is it presents the absolute teaching with no explanation. You just show the reality and you don't explain. And the audience either gets it or they don't get it. And of course most of them don't get it. And I sat there for 2 years not getting it. I had no idea what these talks were about. Absolutely none. And after that I went to Southeast Asia, India, Sri Lanka, in the world of Theravada Buddhism, and gradually over time something would happen and I would remember something from these talks. And I would think, oh, I think this is what it's about. Things started to click. Sometimes with Dharma talks, especially the more subtle ones, it's a delayed reaction. When you listen, you might not understand anything at all. But that's okay. You just listen. And one day, that's what he means. That's what he was talking about. It starts to come. So if you don't understand, don't worry about it. Just listen. We've been talking about anatta, not self. We've been talking about self is a project. It's something that we do. It's not a thing. It's an activity. An activity based on the three movements of this is mine, I am this is myself. Craving, conceit and view. Now at this point in the discourse, the Buddha comes to the practice of not self. And this is what he says. Therefore, for any kind of body, whether past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, superior or inferior, near or far, all body should be regarded with penetrating understanding realistically in this way. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. For any kind of feeling, for any kind of perception, for any kind of construction, for any kind of awareness, past, future or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, superior or inferior, near or far, all awareness should be regarded with penetrating understanding realistically in this way. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. So this is, we could say, the heart of the discourse. What to do, the practice of not self. Again, he's going through the five aggregates. We talked about the five aggregates as 5 categories of experience, the aspects of human experience that we hold on to create a self. The aspects of experience that we find most attractive, in the deep sense of, I can't let this go. So, for example, our deepest pain is attractive because it comes up and the awareness goes shoop right there and holds on to it. Because in it, I know who I am. I have the certainty of identity. And this is deeply, deeply comforting. We like to know who we are and what we are. And we use our experience to construct this sense of certainty. This explains the attractiveness of despair if I go into despair, what's attractive about it is absolute certainty. I know this is what's happening and this is who I am. And there's a deep attraction to that. Anger has a similar attractive quality. When I'm angry, I know who I am. I know what right is, I know what wrong is, and I'm energized by this power, and the self is very strong. This is the five aggregates represent those aspects of experience that we hold on to create a sense of self and define ourselves. This is who I am. This is what the world is. This is who you are. And we have that sense of certainty. The Buddha is saying, whatever aspect of experience we have, we switch the relationship. This is not mine. I am not this. This is not myself. Now again, you notice it's specific. This is not mine. He's not making general philosophical statements. He's not saying we walk around thinking, not self, anatta. It's all one, the cosmos is empty. It's this pain is not mine. This thought is not mine. It does not belong to me. This spoonful of chicken and rice is not mine. It's not me. It's very specific, and this makes it into an ongoing practice. This. So, for example, we may be suffering dukkha. We might see suffering everywhere, and the natural response is to hold it. Oh, this is mine. This is me. And it becomes very heavy. But the practice of not self is to look at it and recognise it's not mine, it's not me, it's not myself. It's just dukkha. That's all. Another way to look at this is to recognise that whatever happens is part of nature. Ajahn Buddhadasa in Thailand used to say, give away whatever does not belong to you. If it does not belong to you, give it away. And of course, what is it that does not belong to us? Everything. Let it go, let it go, let it go. Radical not clinging. When I was a monk in Thailand, a friend of mine, I spent some time at Wat Suan Mok, a whole number of visits over a number of years. And a friend of mine who was also a monk spent some time there, and so I missed this particular incident, but he told me about it later on. Ajahn Buddhadasa was giving one of his talks about not clinging, and he started to go into a list of things of don't cling to. Don't cling to possessions, or don't cling to this. Don't make a prison out of your car. If you cling to something, it becomes a prison. You spent all this money on a car and you've turned it into a prison. Why would you do that? Don't turn it into a prison. Let go of it. And he's working his way up. Now, Ajahn Buddhadasa was a lifelong bhikkhu, lifelong monk. He was born early 20th century, and of course at the time it was the normal custom for a young man after finishing school, before getting on with the serious business of life, of getting married and taking over the family business, to ordain for a few months. His family came from the little provincial town of Chaya, and they ran a store, a kind of large general store, so they were quite well off. And there were two brothers. Buddhadasa was the younger brother. Now, of course, the older brother does everything first. So the older brother would ordain first and then get out, and it was time for the older brother to ordain. And Buddhadasa said, look, could you let me do it first? just as a favour. Look, I'd really like to get in there. Could you just let me go first? And then you can do your turn. And the brother said, okay, you go first. So Buddhadasa ordained, and of course once he was in, he refused to come out. So his poor brother was left there, running the store quite literally. So he dedicated monk, completely dedicated. Since a teenager, he's been a seminarian and then a monk, and by this stage he's an old man. So he's completely dedicated to the life of the monk. In the audience were a number of visiting young Western monks, very junior, very full of enthusiasm. And Ajahn Buddhadasa is giving this talk on not clinging, letting go. And finally he reaches the point where he grabs hold of his robe and he shakes it and he says, and don't make a prison out of this. And this really hit the monks. It's like, poor. And later on my friend was saying the monks were sitting around talking about the discussion, and one of these young monks was really agitated, really upset. And he was saying, but the Ajahn is saying, he's saying we can't cling to anything. And my friend said, yes, that's the teaching. But when you get it, it's like, this is radical. Don't hold on to anything. Don't make a prison out of anything. But let it go. Let it go. So he would say, give back what does not belong to you. What it belongs to is nature. All of this stuff, it belongs to nature. This belongs to nature. And everything that happens in the meditation practice is part of nature. There is no such thing as a bad experience. There's no such thing as a good experience. It's just part of nature. You can say, for example, living here, that rain is bad and sunshine is good. You could have that attitude. And you could live a life like that. And you'd be miserable a lot of the time. Or you could have the attitude, sunshine is good and rain is bad. And you could live that way, but you'd be miserable most of the time. But if you recognise that rain is rain, sunshine is sunshine. Sometimes it's wet, sometimes it's dry. It's just nature. Then there's a freedom within that. And this is what anatta is about. For example, meditators are seeing impermanence. You might see impermanence very clearly. When we see impermanence, we recognise things are flowing, experience flows. Every time we cling, it's like we step into the stream and build a dam. Stop flowing. Stop right here. But the problem is the pressure builds up, the water level rises. We have to keep building and building and building. But sooner or later the dam bursts anyway, because we can't stop the flow. The practice of anatta is recognising this fact and just letting it go, and moving on to the next. Let this one go, move on to the next one. What the Buddha does is he takes everything away. In this discourse, not mine, not. The whole teaching is about not. But what about this? Not. But this? Not. Can I keep this? Not. But not. Not. Cut. And he doesn't present anything to fill its place. He's not saying, okay, it's not this, but it is that. He's just saying, not. Cut. This is the radical nature of the teaching. So it's like there's nothing left, which is scary. This is part of the dukkha that comes. Sometimes the first glimpse of anatta is often accompanied by fear. There's nothing there. You want me to step into this black hole. And of course, that's exactly what the Buddha is saying. He's saying, take a step into that black hole. There is guaranteed, absolutely guaranteed, nothing there. So step right into it. So we do, eventually, when we're ready. The foot goes down, and suddenly there's something there. Just enough to hold that foot, because things are arising all of the time. This is part of impermanence. Things are ceasing all of the time. Whatever we hold on to, it's gone. We hold on to something else, gone. We hold on to something else, gone. But just as things cease, so they arise. So we step out into the black hole and suddenly there's something there. It's a miracle. But in front is the black hole. Okay, so I'll step out one more time and then there's something there. But in front is the black hole. So I'll step out one more time. There's something there. And so we proceed. Sometimes you see in paintings, you see the Buddha walking, and everywhere he steps, there's a lotus flower pops up. Have you seen those paintings? I think this is what it's conveying. It's like you step into the black hole, and there it is. There's the lotus flower. But it wouldn't be there without stepping into the black hole. If we're not prepared to make that step, we never experience the lotus flower. And yet when we look, there's nothing there. And we step, and it's okay. The practice of anatta, in terms of the meditation and in terms of life, it consists of a radical letting go, letting go, letting go, which in part is a radical acceptance. This experience is just what it is. It's fine. It's okay. Sometimes, for example, meditators will obsess about progress. Has anybody here ever obsessed about progress? One or two? Well, I'll put my hand up. I'm one of them. Has anybody obsessed about samadhi? Have I got enough samadhi? No, I haven't. If I don't have enough samadhi, nothing will happen. Earlier this year, I was doing a self-retreat here, up in that kuti. I was here for 7 weeks, meditating alone, and some of it was quite difficult. And one time, I started to obsess about samadhi, and I realised that I don't have enough samadhi. And I looked at it, and I realised, I thought, over the past 20 years of meditation practice, study, teaching, life changes, my samadhi has not improved one little bit. Not at all. And I thought, as far as I can judge, and I'm a meditation teacher, I'm very experienced in the Dharma, I know what I'm talking about. For the next 20 years, if I have 20 years, I can expect absolutely no improvement whatsoever. And this was vividly clear to me. But what was really interesting was that simultaneously as this was the recognition that none of it matters. And the reason why it did not matter is because all of that was just blah, 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 blah. That's all it was. Now, if I want to take it seriously, I would persuade myself, well, it's true. So let's say it's true. Let's say, look, Patrick knows what he's talking about. He's not hysterical. He's reasonably intelligent. He's pretty steady. He understands the meditation process. If he makes that analysis, it's reasonably true. If it's true, what is it? blah, 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 blah. That's all it is. It's just words. It's just thoughts. That's all it is. And it doesn't matter. It really does not matter. And what was interesting for me in this experience was the two were simultaneous. Usually I might fall into the trap and think this, and then later think, oh, gosh, just thinking. But what was interesting there was it was completely simultaneous. And something happened, and I haven't taken thought seriously since. I find I can't, because it doesn't really matter. It's just more creation of a narrative self. It's like a good writer of fiction creating a character called Patrick. That's all it is. But if that's not real, then what is real? This. This is real. There cannot be anything wrong with it, because anything wrong with it is just blah, 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 blah. There cannot be anything right with it, because anything right about it is just blah, 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 blah. It's just this. That's all. So to recognise this is liberating. There's a freedom within it. The Buddha goes on to say, seeing in this way, so this is practicing not self, practicing letting go, letting go, letting go. Seeing in this way, the trained, cultivated student is disenchanted with body, disenchanted with feeling, disenchanted with perception, disenchanted with constructions, disenchanted with awareness. With disenchantment, obsession fades, and from the fading of obsession comes liberation. With liberation comes the understanding of liberation, along with the knowledge, birth is exhausted, the highest life is fulfilled, what should be done is done, there is no more becoming. He's describing the whole process of the maturing of the understanding of not self. And the turning point is what he calls nibbida. Nibbida is very important. Unfortunately, in the early English translations, it was very badly mistranslated as disgust. So it would be the mature, cultivated student is disgusted with the body, etc. Terrible mistranslation. Disenchantment is a much better translation. Nibbida is a compound word. It comes from the root vid, to experience, to know, to discover, to find out. From the same root comes Veda, knowledge. It comes Vedana, feeling. So you have the root vid, to experience, to find, and the prefix nir, N-I-R, which means out. Nibbida is a finding out. It's a discovery. We discover something that we had not realised before. Enchantment, the opposite of disenchantment, is enchantment. And enchantment is always associated with delusion. The classic example of enchantment and the delusion associated with enchantment is romantic love. You're young, full of hormones, you meet someone and bingo, you've just met the perfect person. Just wonderful. Everything that they do is just fantastic. Fantastic, just superb. I must get together with this person. We shall live the rest of our lives together and we shall always be happy. Always. We fall in love with the perfect person. We get together and one day we wake up in the morning and we think, who is this person? Or the classic complaint, you're not the person I married. To which, if you're one of these really irritating people, a Buddhist, you would say, of course not. Haven't you heard of impermanence? This is nibbida. It's a finding out. It's a recognition of something not seen before. And of course, this is where love begins. You begin to realise who this person is. It's a gradual discovery. And with this finding out, a genuine, deep love can take root and can develop. A love that can hold people together for a lifetime. We are enchanted with something when we don't fully understand it. Normally we are enchanted with our experience. I am enchanted with my pain. When I obsess about I don't have any samadhi, I am enchanted with my samadhi and my lack of samadhi. It's enchantment. The disenchantment is a recognition that I can see you, I know what you are, and I don't have to have this relationship. Nibbida is a finding out, a discovery. It's also an experiencing out. We start to experience in a different way than before. When we discover what is going on, our relationship to the world changes, and we find ourselves actually in a new world that we had not imagined before. In the tradition, the classical examples of nibbida, disenchantment, would be, first of all, the Buddha, before he was the Buddha, young Siddhartha, the young aristocrat, growing up as a privileged young man, and suddenly, in the midst of his privilege, he sees dukkha, and he's completely disenchanted with the life that he's been leading. And the power of this disenchantment sends him out into the forest. Another example would be later when he's practicing austerities, and he suddenly sees that the austerities are not working. This whole way of practice is not working. And again, it's a disenchantment, it's a turning around, a recognition of something quite new, and a different way of experiencing the world, and it sends him off in another direction. Nibbida is important as we become disenchanted with ourselves. We become disenchanted with the work it takes to convince myself of how important I am and how important this thought is or this emotion is. Nibbida is both cognitive and affective. It's both of the head and the heart. It's of the heart, it's affective, because the heart is moved to say, enough. I've had enough of this. I don't want any more. So, for example, obsessive thinking. I'm caught up in obsessive thinking, and I think the same thing again and again and again and again and again and again. And I want to know, when will I stop? When will this finish? And the answer is, it will stop as soon as I want it to stop. It will stop as soon as I am fed up with it. And if I say this to a meditation student, they'll say, but I'm already fed up with it. I don't want it. And it still keeps coming. And I say, you still want it. It's still feeding something. It's feeding the self. But there comes a point where we look at this and we think, I really have had enough. And at that point, it stops. This sense of having had enough. And then nibbida is also cognitive. As a result, there's a finding out, there's an understanding that arises because of that. So I let go of something that's been bugging me, something that's been obsessing me. Finally, I actually do let go of it. And everything is different now. I see the world quite differently. I see myself quite differently. When it's a profound letting go, I recognise I cannot go back to what it was before. The world is different now. Nibbida is also affective of the heart, because what previously seemed desirable now is not. People often want to know about progress. How can I tell if I'm making progress? And usually people think of, well, can I sit for half an hour or 1 hour or 1.5 hours or 2 hours or whatever, so you can measure progress like that. I think a much better way to measure progress is ask yourself, what do I desire these days? And has it changed over the past 5 years? Have my desires changed? There's a real truth in desire. When I want, I just want. I may think that I shouldn't want that, but I want it. I may not even want to want that, but I still want it. There's this real basic truth in desire. When Nibbida does its work, we discover actually we don't desire what we used to desire. I just don't want it anymore. What I want is something else. Again, Nibbida, disenchantment, is cognitive. The heart changes. And as a result of that, the world within which we live is quite different. Those of us who have been doing this meditation for a long time, and people sometimes ask, what changes? What difference has it made to you? And sometimes I look at myself and I can say, yes, I can see changes. But really, the most significant change is in the world. The world has changed. I find myself living in a very different world than the world I used to live in. In this world, there are all sorts of possibilities that didn't exist before. In this world, there's a beauty that wasn't there before. So it's not simply that the self changes, it's the world changes as well. We recognise a different world as a result of this. This is Nibbida. It's the turning around when the heart has had enough. Before then, the letting go is artificial. It's work. I let something go, but it comes back. I'll let this thought go. Boom! It's back again. Okay, I'll just let it go. I'll just let it go one more time. It's back. I'll just let it go. Comes back. So this is the practice. That's the work, the hard work of it. But one day, thought arises and we look at it and it's like, not interested. Sorry. And then it's really gone. And this turning around is Nibbida, disenchantment. And of course it's a natural process. Think of the process of growing up. When I was 10, I had certain desires and certain obsessions. When I was 20, I still had desire and obsession, obviously, but they were very different. I had outgrown certain things. I had let go, genuinely let go of certain things. Of course, I grabbed onto something else. But when we talk about growing up, maturing, that's what we're talking about, a progressive letting go, letting go, letting go. And of course, holding on to other things, but even they are different. One book published some years ago, written by a woman called Bernadette Roberts. She was a housewife in California, middle-class Catholic housewife. Very remarkable person. As a teenager, she joined a contemplative nunnery, Catholic order of nuns. And she was part of this order for 10 years, practicing contemplative prayer. And all the theology that she learned was that the purpose of contemplative prayer was to become one with God. At the end of 10 years, she had done it. So she thought, I may as well quit. I've done it. So she left. She got married and had children, normal life. And her prayer life, she would engage in when she would go out bushwalking. She'd be alone, hiking, and that's when she would do her praying. And one time, I think in her 40s, she was in the bush, hiking, and she had this experience where the self fell away, disappeared, no self. And she wrote in her book, she had had this experience before. It was quite familiar. What was different this time was that she knew it was not coming back. Previously, it had always come back. She would have an experience of not self, but the self would come back. But this time, she knew it was never coming back. And that meant she had to figure out how to live without it. She found it quite difficult because her husband didn't understand any of this, and the children didn't understand anything, and her friends didn't understand anything. And so she went looking for someone she could talk to. She went back to her Catholic spiritual advisors, and she went to one particular Catholic priest, and she explained what had happened to her. And he said, "What you have just told me is theologically impossible." He was no help. She went to a famous Zen master. This is California. Everything's in California. Goes to a famous Zen master. Explains. And he's looking at her. Who is this woman? She's not a Buddhist. She doesn't practice Zazen. And just couldn't deal with it. Didn't want to know. He was no help. So she had no one to communicate this to. And she was feeling more and more isolated. She had a friend who lived down the street, a much older woman. Finally, one day, they're going for a walk, and she starts to tell this friend, thinking, I've got to tell someone. She's not going to understand, but she's a friend and I'll tell her. And the friend's listening and said, yeah, that's right. Yeah. And Bernadette says, do you know what I'm talking about? And she says, of course. And Bernadette says, but how? I didn't know you did contemplative prayer. And she says, I don't even know what it is. But look, I'm old. When you get old, you have to let go. You let go of your children because they leave. You let go of your husband because he dies. You let go of your job because you retire. You let go of your friends because they start to die off and you haven't got the energy to go and see them anyway. You let go of your social role because everybody looks at you, becoming visible, you're just an old lady, obviously stupid. You let go of your health because your body's falling apart. You let go of your money because you can't make any money, you're just living on your savings. It all just goes. And one day, it's just, everything is just gone. So this woman had attained the mature state of not self without ever having done any meditation practice whatsoever. For her, it was just natural life. She thought it was just growing old. It just happened. She just did it. It's important to realise this is natural process. This is not something that you have to be mystically favoured. It's not that Buddha is going to look down and think, oh look, she's been sitting on that cushion working really hard and she's earned. I've checked the merit book, she's got enough merit, so I'll go down there and I'll go, thump, there you are. Anatta, zing. It's not like that. It's just natural process. It's like eventually we notice what has always been here. But we actually notice it. And we stop pretending that it's not here. The Buddha goes on to say, with disenchantment, obsession fades, and from the fading of obsession comes liberation. I think this is fairly obvious. The more we let go, the less obsessive we are, and then comes liberation. Now, the word liberation here is vimutti, and it comes from the same root as the Sanskrit word moksha. This idea of liberation is across the yoga traditions in India, and moksha refers to, it can be translated as release, in the sense that if you're practicing archery, you draw the bow back and the bow and the string are incredibly tense, and then when you fire the arrow, you release it, and the arrow goes fuh. This release is moksha. And so here, this is probably what the Buddha is getting at, this sudden sense of release. Oh. So you get this sudden, sometimes very strong, sometimes quite subtle. One person said it's like you put down a burden. You're carrying something heavy, you just put it down. Oh. This is release, liberation. Now this is a temporary experience. With liberation comes the understanding of liberation. This is looking at the experience and recognising what is going on. It's not just liberation, not just release, but understanding it as well. This is what's happening. With liberation comes the understanding of liberation as well as the knowledge. Birth is exhausted, the highest life is fulfilled, what should be done is done, there is no more becoming. Now here the Buddha is talking about full awakening, arahant. But you notice the sense of finality, finish, that's it, it's over, done. Actually, I forgot to say one bit. With disenchantment, obsession fades. Obsession, viraga. And again, this is just the natural process of maturity. When people talk about detachment, sometimes people interpret that as meaning we stop feeling. Someone who is detached must be someone who is indifferent, doesn't care. But it's not that at all. I think I gave the example before. To me it's like if you watch a really good drama on TV. A good drama, good quality drama. So you get this story going, get a good script, good actors. You get this story unfolding and you get emotionally drawn into this drama. So when the heroine and the hero fall in love, you feel love. And when the lovers are tragically parted, you feel sorrow. When the bad guys do evil things, you feel angry. When the good guy comes and draws the sword and carves up the bad guys, you feel elated. And when the good guy dies at the last episode, you feel cheated. I watch Korean dramas. It's completely different from American dramas. In American dramas, the good guys triumph, but in Korean dramas, you never know what's going to happen. You're looking at this drama, and you're going through this whole series of emotional responses to what's going on the screen. Question: are these emotions real? Of course they are. Even as you're going through this emotion, do you know that the situation is not real? Yes. The events are clearly not real. Yet the emotion is real. And it's this very fact that allows us to experience these emotions more freely than we do in our real lives, where we take ourselves much more seriously and we hold ourselves in. It's the classic example of the men who cry only in a darkened theatre. And then when the lights come on, it's like, yeah, that was all right. It was okay. If you're an Australian bloke, this is what you say. You say, yeah, that was okay. Time for a beer. And you disappear out the theatre as fast as possible. So it's the fact that it's not real that enables the emotional life to really flower. This is what happens when obsession fades, when detachment develops. It's not that there's no emotional life. It can actually be the exact opposite. That the emotions flow much more freely and readily because there's a recognition that fundamentally the situation is not real. It's a different way of relating to the world. So we come to this, the end, where we have birth is exhausted, the highest life is fulfilled, what should be done is done, there is no more becoming. The orthodox understanding of this is the Arahant, fully awakened. But it has a relevance at a less than full awakening level. What it's conveying is a sense of finality when we have a complete intimacy of the experience. This is an aspect of emptiness, sunyata. And we've actually spoken about this when we were talking about Satipatthana. When we were talking about the maturity of Satipatthana, there's an expression, something like, the practitioner knows there is body, there is mind. You get a very similar expression when the Buddha is talking about emptiness. The Buddha was asked, why do people say the world is empty? And the Buddha said, the world is said to be empty because it is empty of self and of what belongs to self. So, no self. So emptiness means absence. Something is missing, and what's missing is the self. And of course, absence is always harder to notice than presence. You notice when you meditate, during the meditation training, whatever arises, note it. So you recognise something is present, be mindful. We're always working with what is present because that's the most obvious. But sometimes we notice what is absent, although that's much more subtle. For example, we might be working with painful sensation, and I'm closely looking at the physical sensation. I'm completely present to the sensation, following it. And suddenly I realise I'm not upset. I'm not agitated. Agitation is absent. The sensation is present, but the upset is absent. And it might take me longer to notice that because it's more subtle. When the Buddha is explaining emptiness, he's talking about the field of perception of the meditator, the practitioner. And he says, in this way, she regards it as empty of what is not there. There's a recognition of absence. Something is missing. And in this case, it's the self is missing. In this way, she regards it as empty of what is not there, but what remains, she understands in this way. There is this, or this is. This is a genuine, undistorted, pure entry into emptiness. You notice we've been talking about two aspects. The not aspect, not mine, not me, not myself, not. Give it away, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. If I let go of everything, what's left? If everything goes, what's left? Nothing. Concept. Just a concept. Just an idea. Nothing. We let go of everything. What's left? This. This experience of letting go of everything. This. A complete intimacy. No concept. Nothing added. Just this. Nothing to say about it. No judgment to be added to it. It's just this. That's all. And this is what the Buddha is getting at here. Empty of what is not there, the flip side of absence is presence. Something is not there, but what is? In this way, she regards it as empty of what is not there, but what remains she understands in this way. There is this, or this is, idam atiti. This is her genuine, undistorted, pure entry into emptiness. So this isness, there is this, is what the Buddha calls tatata, suchness, thusness, just thisness, which, according to Ajahn Buddhadasa, is the ultimate teaching. Many years ago, before I ordained, this is early 80s. The second time I went to Thailand was in 1982. This is after practicing Zen in Hawaii. And over the years that I was in Southeast Asia, I would wander in and out of Thailand. There was a kind of crossroads. And every time I went to Thailand, I spent time at Wat Suan Mok, Ajahn Buddhadasa's monastery. There was a program for specifically foreign visitors, mostly Westerners. When I first went there, the program consisted at the time of me and 2 other people, one of whom was a monk who was staying there for a year. So there were 3 of us at Wat Suan Mok. And every time I went there, the program was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And at one time, there were about 20 people there, and the monastery would put on a retreat every month. And Ajahn Buddhadasa would give the talks. And at this time, he had a very good translator, Venerable Santikaro, an American monk, fluent in Thai, who gave these superb translations of Buddhadasa's talks. Just fantastic. And this particular retreat, it was wet season. And this is southern Thailand, in the peninsula. Wat Suan Mok is a hill covered with tropical rainforest, and they built a wall around it, because all around the wall the forest has been cut down. Inside the monastery you find the forest. A hill and the surrounding territory. It's wet season. It's a tropical rainforest. It is wet. It is incredibly wet. Everything that can rot does rot, including human flesh. And facilities for the meditators were quite primitive. Different buildings were used to house people. My favourite dormitory was they had a big barn, and on the top level of the barn, I used to stay there with a few other people. I liked that place. And the meditation hall was an old scout hall at the edge of the monastery. They had built basic toilets in different places in the forest, and very, very basic washing facilities. In the monastery they had rigged up this rough kitchen where there was a volunteer lady who used to cook the meals for the meditators. And the Dharma talks were held at the centre of the monastery in this big building called a bort. It's the formal Dharma hall of the monastery. And this building, very ornate, very big, but built of concrete. And in the teacher's place there was this huge throne, Thai style, and Ajahn Buddhadasa would sit on top, and everybody was sitting on the floor, but this not a nice wooden floor, it was concrete floor. But because we were soft foreigners and we needed something underneath us, each meditator was given a Hessian bag that we could sit on. And in the retreat we would have to walk from one place, from the hall to the toilets, to the dining area, to the dormitory, to the Dharma hall, to back, forth. We always seemed to be walking from one place to another. In the middle of the rainy season, constantly raining, in the middle of this tropical rainforest, obscene with life, seething with life. So we trudge into the hall, sit down on our Hessian bags, which are already damp. Nothing dried, nothing ever dried. Everything was damp. And we had listened as Ajahn Buddhadasa gave us these amazing Dharma talks. And one day he was telling us about tatata, suchness, just thisness, as the ultimate teaching of Buddhism. He said, it's raining. And you think the rain is bad, because there you are, trudging around, always wet, never dry. On the other side of this hill, there are farmers who are dancing for joy in their fields because of this rain, because they will be able to feed their families for another year. They think the rain is good. You think the rain is bad. You're both wrong. The rain is wet. And that is the ultimate teaching of Buddhism. If you can understand that, there's nothing more to be understood. Birth is destroyed, the highest life is fulfilled. What should be done is done, there is no more becoming. The rain is wet. That's all. What he's talking about is complete intimacy, when there's nothing getting in the way, when there's no one getting in the way. It's just the experience. That's all. Of course, it's not good enough to stand out in the rain. I wouldn't recommend that the next time it rains and you're in search of enlightenment to stand out there. Okay, I'm wet, where's the enlightenment? It's not just that the rain is wet, it's knowing the rain is wet. It's not just wet, it's wet, wise, liberated. It's a relationship to the rain, a relationship to wet, a relationship to dry, a relationship to good, to bad. It's just this, that's all. Nothing else, just this. This is the ultimate teaching. If anybody asks you, what is Buddha's ultimate teaching, you just tell them, the rain is wet. And you look very wise and you walk away. Don't stay for any questions. So the discourse ends. This is what the Blessed One said. And the group of 5 bhikkhus rejoiced in the Blessed One's words. And as he spoke, the minds of the group of 5 bhikkhus were fully liberated from the taints. Then there were 6 arahants in the world. So this discourse brings all of the students from the first stage of awakening to full awakening. So you can see the role of anatta, the role of not self. It's the maturing of the practice. It's what takes us all the way to full awakening. And it boils down to a radical simplicity and a radical acceptance. One way of looking at it is, whatever is happening is what should be happening. Don't look for anything else, but just be intimate with what is here.